Hello everyone, Andy here, and it's time to talk about stats and numbers and meta watches and stuff. So I've probably called this video something inflammatory like Kill Team is Games Workshop's worst balanced game, right? And of course, anyone watching this will know how much I'm a fan of Kill Team and have immediately downvoted from the raw clickbait, but I've got bad news. I think, from the raw stats, Kill Team is Games Workshop's most unbalanced game. Well, compared to 40k and Age of Sigmar, at least. In this video, I want to look at the win rates of Kill Team, compare them to 40k and Sigmar a bit, and then give a few theories as to what the raw data might actually mean. I shall be throwing up relevant pictures, but hopefully you enjoy looking at gameplay footage of random Warhammer games, or if I'm feeling particularly spicy, Star Wars cinematics. Kill Team is generally promoted as Games Workshop's most balanced game, or perhaps that is actually Underworld's, but let's be honest, nobody plays Underworld, so it's hard to say. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is playing Underworlds, which is the top team? It's an unknowable proposition. Anyway, so Games Workshop publishes MetaWatch articles and says they want all of their factions to be within a 45 to 55% win rate. That's their goal and their view of a balanced game. Now, we're not here to challenge that. We're going to work within their framework. So, looking at the latest MetaWatch articles for 40k and Age of Sigmar, they have 26 and 27 factions respectively. And of course, we all know that 40k is an unbalanced hellscape of a rule set, don't we? And we all have never played Age of Sigmar, so assume it's equally bad, don't we? Well, shock horror, but they both have 5 factions outside of their desired win rate range. 3 above and 2 below. Now that is so uniform that I almost want to say it's rigged. I did therefore have a quick poke around for outside sources, but they seem to just confirm the official Warcom MetaWatch article numbers. And we could argue they are cherry picking dates. Like the 40k one was only looking at 12 days of tournaments, so I don't know, kind of a bit useless really. Looking back at the previous MetaWatches, however, we see that again, both game systems are showing 8 factions outside of their desired win rate range, so a few more. That's just under a third of teams. Not as balanced as Games Workshop would like them, of course, but it's being improved. It's gone from 8 to 5, not bad. Now let's look at Kill Team, and let's ignore the compendium. That's a whole other discussion, but again, we're working within Games Workshop's framework to look at balance, and they've made it very clear they don't care about balance of compendium. So, we have 21 factions, 5 fewer than 40k. And how many of those are outside of the 45 to 55% win rate bracket? 11. 50% of specialist teams are not within the 45 to 55% win rate when looking at all tournaments. We can also look at the larger tournaments with over a certain number of players and rounds, which is probably a better data set, but the only thing that changes there is that Hand of the Archon and the Exaction squad haven't really been included yet, and so we have 12 teams outside of the win rate, but our total teams are 19 instead of 21. It's not looking good. Yeah, I stress now, not looking good. We'll start trying to interpret the data soon. Right now it's just the numbers. I'm going to look at the larger tournament data for a bit now because I think that the sudden introduction of 2 new teams skews the data oddly and honestly isn't fair for anybody. The 5 teams above the 55% win rate are, top to bottom, Elucidian Starstriders, Galloppox Infected, Void Dancer Troop, Navy Breaches and Blooded Traitors. Then the 7 teams below the win rate in descending order are Wormblade, Pathfinders, Cassaking, Commandos, Kroot, Farstalkers, Hyrotech Circle, and finally, Phobos. Minor note, both Hyrotech Circle and Phobos are a full 10% lower than the next lowest, both being under a 30% win rate. Ouch. But that's it. That's the raw numbers. As much as we all malign the full-scale games of 40k and Age of Sigmar, I'd like to say that Kill Team is the more balanced game. Just from the numbers and the way Games Workshop has declared balance can be attained, we have to accept that Kill Team's balance is absolutely wild and, again, just going from what Games Workshop says and how they define balance, worse than their main games. It would have been quicker for me to tell you which teams were within the desired win rate bracket. That's how bad the situation is. Anyway, that's pretty much the raw numbers done, and from here on I'm going to try and interpret the data and give my own heavily biased, let's be honest, thoughts on what it could all mean. So one interpretation, if we are looking at these stats from a similar view as the 40k or Sigmar armies, might be that the game is incredibly unbalanced. In 40k, the worst performing faction is Deathwatch, and the best is Genestealer Cults. What on earth did Arcs of Omen do to them? They were like terrible. Okay, whatever. This isn't a 40k video, right? Anyway, it will be generally accepted that two players, essentially regardless of skill, would not be able to beat GSC with Deathwatch, assuming both are taking the top meta lists. Or here's a much better way of viewing how 40k and power ratings work. The Genestealer Cult player could lose that matchup, but the Deathwatch player could not win that matchup. And if we take those two equally skilled players and swap the army they're playing, does that change the outcome of the match? Are we seeing the skill of the players reflected in the win rates, or are we seeing the power of the army when we look at 40k win rates? Looking at Kill Team, let's think of the same question. Could a Phobos player beat a Star Striders player? Equally skilled players. Okay, and now let's swap the teams. Does that change who wins? Kill Team is such a lethal game that the outcome of the game could rest on a knife's edge. A single fluffed roll turning a good trade into a bad one. If you misposition, then the raw stats of your army don't matter. Your misplay will be punished, and most teams have the tools to punish. If you give me Star Striders, I'll lose with them. Easy statement, I don't know the team, they're fragile, I'd lose into any other team. Can the same be said for games? For Genestealer Cults into Deathwatch. For Genestealer Cults into Deathwatch, yes. Does player skill play as much of a role in the matchup, or is it mainly list building and raw data sheets? Of course, skill plays a factor in both games. There are no absolutes. We are not the Sith. Or maybe we are. We probably are, actually. Just, looking at the Jedi political stances, I think most people are far more Sith than Jedi. Obviously, most people probably more in the, the grey Jedi. But, okay, moving on. 40k isn't a zero skill game, and it's 100% the list you take. We can't say that. But likewise, Kill Team isn't a 100% skill game. The faction you take does matter. Skill might be significantly more important in Kill Team, and so the gap between a good player and a bad player is amplified, and so a top tier player probably could win against a low tier or maybe even average player using literally any team. And a bad player playing a top tier team can easily be beaten by an average player playing an average team. I think we can all agree on that. Certainly, when I think about the different teams and their tiers, I think of them as skill amplifiers. A better team will allow you to beat the same skilled player, but it probably won't let you beat a better player. Ignoring bad matchups, there's definitely still bad matchups in the game, obviously, let's be honest. I mean, if your damage profiles don't match up with their wound breakpoints, good luck, sir. So, what is the positive take on having over 50% of teams not being within the target bracket of balance, right? How is that possible, but the game still be widely considered as balanced by those that play it? Well, my take is that it's kind of two things piling on top of each other. Firstly, it's the small sample size. Datasets are never perfect, and the issue with Kill Team on BCP is that we have, sadly, relatively small datasets. We also have a relatively small community that can become an echo chamber. Blooded were, without a shadow of a doubt, for months, the worst team in the game. Then, one guy goes on a crusade to prove they're acceptable, and the next thing you know, they're one of the ones above the bracket. I have no concrete conclusions for you. My real point is to ask you a question. How can we look at the raw numbers, but still think the game is balanced? How can we look at such an uneven field and convince others and those outside of the kill team community that it's due to a skill disparity, not a stats disparity? Thanks for watching. Stay safe.